But Judaism and Islam are Unitarian religions.
So when you quoted 4:121, this chapter, when God says, do not stay free, for your God is one God. So what do you understand by that? God is what? One what?
God is one being.
When the Quran doesn't say God is one being, when the Quran says, know for sure that there is no God but He. So there is only one God. So in the Quranic understanding, there is none but God. So isn't that Unitarianism?
Isn't that what?
Isn't that Unitarianism?
No, because in scripture, you mean in the Quran? Well, first of all, in the Quran, I mean, every time I repeat it's the Christian concept of the Trinity.
We're talking about the Quranic self-definition of who God is, or how many God is. So when the Quran describes who God is, it describes Allah, and He has various attributes. Does the Quran describe God being more than one person?
Well, actually, you can argue that some of the divine prerogatives are distributed to more than one person.
Trinitarian monotheism separates Christianity from all the rest of the world's religions. Yes, there are three great monotheistic world religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But Judaism and Islam are Unitarian religions. But Judaism and Islam are Unitarian religions.
Let's have a discussion properly and define your verses. So, just because the Quran says there are other people who can create, like Jesus, for example, does that make God not one God? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the Quran both affirms that Allah is the exclusive creator of life, created as solely divine prerogative, and that Allah creates life by virtue of the mechanism of breathing His spirit, which according to Surah 19 is actually a personal agent. And so,
is God the creator? Is He the only creator? That's what
yeah, and I'm saying that
the Quran says He is the best of creators, meaning that He can give creative ability to other people. For example, you can create things. Jesus, for example, he was given the authority and permission from God to mold from birds, clay, and create life. So does that make someone else God? Just because he's given this?
Actually, I would argue that that's the response that should really give.
I'm not interested in what Shafi'i says. Have a discussion with me and see what your arguments are for. So you said the Quran doesn't describe God as a Unitarian God. So I want to know, how many gods does the Quran describe?
Let me respond to the point that you just made. Surah 32 actually affirms that the Holy Spirit is involved in the Christian human life in general. So it's not.
Can you have a look?
Sure, you can. Verses 7 through 9 of Surah 32.
So if other agents are involved in creating, does that make them God?
If the Quran affirms that creation is exclusively divine prerogative, and the Spirit is involved in the creation of human life in general, then yes, I would argue that.
Quran says He's the one who originates everything. Correct. So is there other than God who originates things from nothing? Okay. So if you can show us where there are other beings, other agents who originates from nothing, like God, then you will say, okay, there's something else who originates like God.
So let me read the context, but I think some context. So this is from Surah 32. This is from verse 3. Is it that they say He has fabricated it? No, it is the truth from your Lord, so that you, O Prophet, do warn a people to whom no warner has come before you, may they take the right path. Allah is the one who created the heavens and the earth, not between them in 6 days. And then He positioned Himself on the throne. Other than Him, there is neither a guardian for you nor an intercessor. Would you then not observe the advice? And in verse 7 says, Who made well whatever He created, and started the creation of man from clay. Then He made His progeny from a drop of semen from despised water. Then He gave him a proportioned shape and breathed into him of His spirit. So that's the mechanism that's used to create life, that He breathes in man through His spirit. And that's the
talking about the creation of man. I gave an example. God, Allah creates one who is the originator. He begins the creation from nothing. He originates. So do you have anything in the Quran, any other agents who originates creation from nothing?
Allah creates life in the womb.
You're concentrating on...
Because
I am talking about...
specifically that only Allah creates life in the womb.
God is the one who originates things. He's called the originator. He originates things. Where do you find within the Quran other agents who originate things from nothing?
You didn't see what I said, because what I said is that the Quran specifically tells us that Allah is the sole exclusive creator of life in the womb.
Allah is the sole exclusive creator of life in the womb. Where does it say that?
I think it's in Surah 15, I can't remember off the top of my head.
So why did you bring this chapter under? And how does that chapter help you with this argument?
Sorry?
The verses that you've just quoted, how does that help Allah being exclusive creator in the womb?
Because that's what the Quran tells us.
Not what
the
you just
Quran
read.
also tells us that
Not what
Allah
you've just
creates
read.
life by the mechanism of breathing His spirit. He was identified as a
You're
personal
confusing creation of life, creation of trees and animals and plants. I'm saying God is the one who creates everything from nothing. He is the originator. Do you find anywhere where
But you're
other
changing the
agents...
topic, because
I'm not switching
you're
the topic.
taking the point. Because the point that
Remember
I'm
what we
making is that the
discussed.
Quran tells us specifically that
Remember what
Allah
we
is the one who
discussed.
creates life in the womb.
We're discussing about, is there anyone other than God who has got the attributes? God is the one who has always been there. That's what the Quran says. There's nobody besides it. Do you find somewhere in the Quran, someone is like God in his nature?
I just gave you the example of the spirit, which is the mechanism by which God creates life.
I don't actually follow what you're saying. Remember, you questioned the Quranic process of God is not Unitarian, it's monotheist. So monotheism means there is one God, but he's not Unitarian, meaning he's not one person.
Yeah, the Quran never affirms that.
Okay, so the Quran doesn't affirm that what you say. What does the Quran affirm? Does the Quran affirm there's only one God and there's no God
The
besides
Quran
him?
affirms that there's one God.
Okay, so when he's one God, how many person is it?
Well, the Quran doesn't tell us.
How many person is it?
Well, the Quran doesn't tell us.
Is there any biblical distinction between being and personhood?
Certainly.
Can you give one? Can you give one?
Well, certainly. The fact that we can speak of mankind generically and speak of individuals personally, and that we can make generic statements about mankind in general, but then make exceptions and speak about persons, demonstrates that all of the biblical writers function on the very same foundation that you and I function on every day. Every day, you and I know that we are human beings, but we also know that we are not all other human beings. We recognize the concept of humanity, and yet we recognize that we as individuals are personal. I am a human being, but my being is shared only by one person. In fact, if more than one person shared my being, they'd put me in one of those funny places with the nice, comfy, jacket that I wear. So that's unusual for the human being. But remember, the difference is God's being is not limited. It is infinite and is shared by three divine persons. So I see a category distinction.
Even if you are the most hardcore, Bible-believing evangelical on the planet, you surely think that God gave you a brain. Use your brain.
Is there any biblical distinction between being and personhood?
Okay, so what does the Quran say? Does the Quran say he's two persons or three?
Well, the Quran, in repudiating Trinitarianism, equates it with tritheism and affirms monotheism. The Quran affirms monotheism.
Does the Quran define Allah being more than one person?
Not specifically, no.
Right.
But you can make an argument that there are other, like the Holy Spirit, for example, in the Quran has divine prerogatives, which I think is problematic for companies.
Just because you have, for example, a prophet doing miracles, which no one can do. Can you do miracles? I don't think you can do miracles, neither can I. So if God gives us authority to perform miracles, He doesn't make us God because we have got some divine prerogatives. We are talking about how is God of Islam, Allah, not being one person God, one personal God, not a Unitarian God. What makes you think it's more than one person? You must have some evidence to back up from that.
Well, I mean, the Quran affirms monotheism, but it never affirms that there's one person.
That's what you're claiming.
That-
So
that-
what
you show me a
indicates
verse
to
where it says
what indicates to you that God is more than one person?
Well, that's the Trinitarian concept of God, but the Quran never actually repudiates that. The Quran repudiates tritheism, which is not Trinitarianism.
One God says, do not say three. Three what?
The Quran says not say three, in Surah 4 verse 1, 171. It's
Three what?
It's clear what it's saying, because it says do not say three gods, because it then
No,
refers
no, no.
monotheism.
Does it say three gods?
Sorry?
Does the Quran say do not say three gods?
It's implied very strongly.
Don't say imply. Let's look
It
at
says
the
do not
text.
say three, for
Three
there is
what?
no God but one God.
No, three what?
Gods.
It doesn't
It
say
says
three
do not
gods,
say
does
three,
it?
for there is no God but one God.
First of all,
If I say don't say three because there's only one God, what are you doing? You're putting the two in the same
let's not start.
category.
There's two different arguments. There's two clearly distinguished arguments here. The Quran says do not say three. Now, what do you say about God? Three what?
Three persons.
The Quran says don't say that because you've included persons or beings. Doesn't matter what you bring, do not say that. That's what the Quran is saying. That's what the Quran left is vague because it can refute your position, it can refute the position of a person who says there's three beings. That's what the vagueness does. It refutes blankly every concept of God is more than one.
Oh, I disagree with the Quran.
You don't have to agree
The
or
Quran
disagree.
does not engage with the historic Christian understanding of the nature of
First of all,
God.
as we were discussing the first point, the Quranic concept of God is clearly one God. God says, there is none but Him. There is none.
And Jesus.
So, the Quran, I'm not sure how you were discussing with Shabir Ali or who else you were talking about, and you were saying, well, it doesn't help, because if the Quran is quite clear, there is only one God and there's none besides Him, it doesn't help bringing out God is not one person. Because if you say God is not one person, you should be able to find verses where God is saying more than one person. In the absence of any of these, you have to take the Quran as it says. The whole Quran is describing who God is. How many person is it?
Well, the Quran doesn't tell us.
You can't just start by saying, I'm just going to start here. It's a oneness of person. That's just all there is to it. The infinite, eternal Allah with 99 beautiful names still has to be just one person. It's impossible for there to be three divine persons. Why? Is God's being limited in some way? Is God's being limited in some way? If divine revelation reveals to us the existence of three divine persons, is that not what we should believe?
Is there any biblical distinction between being and personhood?